Yeah, folks, that's right. A new Galactus is almost here. We just got the official reveal for the upcoming Marvel Snap season, Heralds of Galactus. There's a big old new 612 Galactus first steps on the way, along with, I think, 9 other cards we're going to talk about in great detail in this video now that we know their final stats and text lines. We can score each of these from 1 to 4 stars, locking in my predictions for which cards are going to be the best and the worst. So let's kick things off here with the new season pass card himself, the big fella, Galactus First Steps. And this time around, he's a 612, a much higher base stat line. And he's got this kind of complicated text line we've talked about before when we first initially saw this in the leaks a long time ago. It reads, "My Herald is the next character I see you play. End of turn, +2 power if you're winning my Herald's location, if in hand or in play." So if Galactus is in hand or in play, then the next time you play a card, he's going to mark that card, well, specifically character, it can't be a skill. He's going to mark that character as his Herald, and it gets this little like glow and stuff to kind of indicate that it's the Herald. It seems the opponent will also know which card is the Herald and which location matters for this condition. And then as long as you're continually winning that location, then Galactus is going to keep getting +2, +2, +2. Of course, there are 6 turns in a given game. If you're all in on that location and winning it, that's +12 that can be given to your Galactus First Steps, which is a 24 power Galactus. I don't think you'll always hit all 6, even if your deck is built for that. You know, sometimes things just go weird. Your opponent has a power spike and you miss a turn here or there. So more reliably, might this be like a 620 Galactus? Yeah, I think that's kind of in range for this. And, you know, it's in that world of the really big 6 drops. You got, you know, the Infinauts, but maybe more comparatively is like Blob or Red Hulk. And we have seen those find success before, right? Those have each in different worlds in their own metas found some success. In fact, each has got nerfed because they kind of got too big. I think the effect here on Galactus has actually been nerfed since we initially saw him in the data mines. I believe he used to give +3, so maybe he was also getting too big. But ultimately here, you've got like that big crazy power spike card. So the idea, I think, is, you know, like through the first 5 turns, I'm all in on a given spot. I just really want to win somewhere. I'm going to really dominate. I was thinking about good cards for that. You know, we just got like the Thing First Steps, for instance, or Human Torch First Steps, where they're not necessarily ideal at the beginning, but if you're all in, you know, and when you finally hit like turn 5 and you finish off with the Thing, you know, you can power spike, maybe lock that in on a big torch. The Thing is certainly very good at securing a location because he's such a big swing, you know, 10 himself, deleting, you know, on average, probably 4 or 5 power from the opponent. That basically affords you that location, and then you hope Galactus could just power spike somewhere else and basically solo it, carry it all on his own so that, you know, you're not overcommitted too much. And, you know, you might have some cards that kind of go across. So even if you fill out 4 spots early to help win, you know, stuff like Mr. Fantastic, Miss Marvel, right, can like still chip into another spot. Maybe you have a Claw in the deck. So the first 4 turns, you really load up one spot. Then you dump a Claw on turn 5. You hope that holds. And then Galactus, you know, can test somewhere else. We've seen those big power spike things work and be possible. I don't know exactly what kind of deck I trust to be built around that right now, like how all in it needs to be, how perfect it needs to be from a curve fit standpoint. Is like Quicksilver always the Herald of Galactus, for instance, just to ensure that you have a turn 1, and then maybe there's like a Wiccan deck, that sort of thing, where you can even maybe play Galactus a little bit early and still have stuff to do later in the game as well. Not totally sure. I think it's going to take a little bit of solving, a little bit of experimentation there. I'm certainly going to try to run a double Galactus deck because that would be really, really funny. Probably won't be good, but it'll be funny. But ultimately what I'll say is, like, I think the numbers here do get big enough that that's pretty interesting and pretty compelling, and could definitely be a game plan of sorts where if you trust that Galactus to win, that's enough. And a 24 power Galactus could definitely do that. Also keep in mind, you know, this is an end of turn card. Stuff like Fantastic card could be an additional synergy for those other cards. For Galactus, again, all kind of chipping in there. I mean, technically, Invisible Woman as well now. First Steps kind of feeds in as well. It's just +2, but, you know, might all add up to be something pretty nice. So, you know, that might be the angle right away. It might take something a little more bespoke to kind of really solve this puzzle, but ultimately the numbers are big enough that I think Galactus First Steps does look like a pretty good card. So next up here, let's talk about Silver Surfer First Steps, yet another end of turn card. She is a 3/4. and she reads, end of turn, if you're winning this location with an on reveal card, copy its text. So this is a way to duplicate some on reveals a little more affordably than something like say Absorbing Man, but also notably a little less time demanding than something like Absorbing Man, because a couple things can happen here, right? Like if you just play this down on turn 3 and you don't have an on reveal card, well, there's nothing for her to copy. So you can preemptively play this down on turn 3 and then come back later with the on reveal card that you really like. I think the easy, obvious example is Silver Surfer, the OG Silver Surfer, right? So just be sure that you can kind of win that spot late. Say maybe play like a Sebastian Shaw and Surfer on top of this Silver Surfer on turn 6. And then, you know, like maybe that's enough to help you win that spot. And then she becomes Silver Surfer at the end of the turn and she rolls off again, which of course, double Silver Surfer can be absolutely insane because she's also herself, of course, a 3-drop. So it kind of lets you like set up for later. You actually even have a little bit of control too, where if you play this with an on reveal, if you're not winning that location, she's still going to wait until you are. So you could like power spike something later to then flip that location at the end. And then she becomes that on reveal card. It does seemingly select a random on reveal at a given location. So if you had multiples, might be a little weird if you had like Gladiator and Silver Surfer to power spike in that Surfer deck. Like Ash, you might become a Gladiator. That could certainly backfire. So you got to be a little bit careful with like positioning and timing and stuff to some extent, but I think still ultimately cheaper and more flexible than cards like Absorbing Man. I'll also note that because you can wait to activate her, you could actually like play her with Fantasticar, because she is an end of turn card until she copies text. Right? So like you could actually buff her to a 3/6, then later have her copy the text. Now, once she copies the text, presumably she is no longer an end of turn card, much like Mystique or something becomes an ongoing card and loses her on reveal nature. This should presumably lose her end of turn nature and become an on reveal card, fully copying that text. So, you know, that's a consideration, but also could be relevant to something like Odin, you know, where it's like, oh, okay, Odin just gets to rip this off again, you know. So at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is, you know, being able to copy really key on reveals with some kind of intelligence and plan behind it seems really valuable to me. I think Silver Surfer, super obvious game plan, but I suspect some other things could pop up as well, where there's just, of course, really good on reveals and she becomes a cheap way to replicate those without blowing your curve like Absorbing Man, which I think makes this a potentially very powerful card, because I don't think satisfying the end of turn will necessarily be crazy difficult. Like obviously the opponent will have some knowledge, you know, that you're trying to win the Silver Surfer location, but if you just go ham, it might be good enough. Also keep in mind, of course, you can't just wait till turn 6. Like you don't have to play her on turn 3. You can absolutely just dump her on 6 with Surfer. As long as you know you're going to win that location, that's absolutely a fine plan to go there too. So early options, late options, both work potentially really nicely for this card, and I think that makes her a quite interesting option. And again, I think another powerful card. Unfortunately, this is another one of the super premium pass cards. So to get, you know, both her and Galactus, you're looking at $20 total for these premium passes. I think they both look pretty good. I think they both look very playable. So I think once again, we're going to see a ton of pressure for people to get the season passes. So next up here, we have Stardust. This guy looks so freaking cool. I think this one's unchanged since we initially saw it in the data mined versions. He is a 4/7 with ongoing. Cards can't be added to locations except by playing or moving them. So basically, anything that summons a card into play is turned off. So, you know, first example that came to mind for me is like Arnim Zola. If you're worried about, you know, that Arnim Zola Black Panther turn, just plop a Stardust down. They're going to try to Arnim Zola their Black Panther, and they're not going to be able to add cards to those other locations. I guess it just fizzles. Like the Panthers just disappear and your opponent has absolutely zero power on board. Similarly with stuff like Nimrod. I guess Nimrods just simply cannot be added to other locations. You know, more simple examples of like Doom 2099 we've seen with some end of turn packages lately, right? Doom 2099 can't add cards to other locations. They have to actually be played from hand, or if stuff's already out there, of course, just moved from location to location. So this does become a tech card of sorts against decks like that. Now, when it comes to that tech card conversation, it's always a tough one. You know, tech cards are hard to run. Like, let's be clear, right? Because, you know, you're running a card that's only good against who knows, 10-20% of your matchups or something, right? And it's kind of dead in the other 80% of the matchups, right? And that ebbs and flows depending on metas. Like certain metas may become really popular. Some crazy YouTuber may put out a video that's insane, and you know, for a day or two, like maybe Stardust becomes awesome for a day or two because Regis or Dexter or whoever, Cozy, rest in peace, Cozy. He's still with us, don't worry, just not in the world of Snap. Somebody puts out a video, right? Alex Kochia and Kate and Best. I don't know. I feel bad now. I'm trying to name everybody, but you know, you get the idea. Some awesome YouTuber puts out a video, and it's like, okay, Stardust is good for a day or two, and then he goes away, right? Is that deck like falls out of fashion or whatever? And you kind of get those ebbs and flows, but they never really peak that high. It's never like crazy runnable where every deck's running it. 4/7's a cool stat line because 7 power is a really nice baseline. But there's still way better 4-drops to run. Even Zabu packages that are already doing this, which we have seen some of these kind of Zabu tech slot packages, but I don't think Stardust makes the cut overly Enchantresses of the world or the Shang-Chi's of the world, because I think this is a far more situational sort of tech card. Even with that higher power baseline, it's probably just not good enough. So ultimately, like, this is one of those cards I think is totally fine to have for a day or two, once in a while, featured location, crazy meta read, whatever. It pops into play for a little bit. It's really fun. It also does have some ongoing synergies, which are kind of relevant, but, you know, probably not really that good in Spectrum either. There's way better ongoing cards to benefit from your ongoing decks. So what I'm getting at is, like, it's okay to have, just not a card I would ever really go out of my way for, not one I feel like is going to be a meta star or a standout, have some funny moments when randomly summoned. A tech card occasionally, maybe good in certain featured locations, limited time game modes, that sort of thing, and then just goes away. So totally fine tech card of sorts. All right, so next up here is Frankie Raye Nova. This is a 2/3, which has changed. When we initially saw this in the data mines, I think it was a 3/4, if I remember right, but it got cheaper. After the next time you play a 6-cost card, double this card's power. So this would be a 2/6, of course, just playing things really naturally. You know, play it down on 2, whenever, weave it in, and you get a 6 power card for 2, which is above rate, right? That's actually pretty big for 2. It's not so big that it's like mind-boggling. We have a lot of big 2-drops. Some of these most powerful 2-drops historically have been in the 10+ range pretty easily, frankly. So 2/6, it's nice, but it doesn't make you lose your mind. But of course, that scales nicely with any kind of buff deck, which we have a lot of these buff decks. We've seen other 2-drops like Mr. Sinister, for instance, really benefit from buffs. Frankie actually is a very similar space to Mr. Sinister. It doubles the buffs, but starts from a little higher standpoint, right? So a little bigger potentially than even something like Mr. Sinister, but it does have this conditionality. Like, is your buff deck willing to run a 6-drop that is consistently activating your Frankie? Because if you're not playing a 6-on-6 every time, this is going to fall apart real quick, right? It has a lot less independence. So this card, I think, like, from an output standpoint and from a scaling standpoint, there's a lot to like about this. And it's arguably even better at 2 in many cases there, because you can just weave it in a lot easier. You know, play a Gwenpool on turn 4. This slots in really nicely on 5 with a Brood and a Frankie Raye Nova, right? And then on 6, you do, I'm not sure what. That sort of falls apart, right? Like, I don't know if it's Odin. What is it? Is it Dr. Doom? I don't know. I don't have a really natural deck fit for it, right? But I like that it's 2. So this is one of those where I think it's a solid baseline. There's a lot to work with here. I think it'll have a moment. I think it'll have a deck. I don't know if it's going to be right away. I don't really see the path on this at this most obvious. You know, there's no really standout deck that comes to mind for this right now. And from a curve fit standpoint and just from a meta standpoint, where does this go right now? I don't see it, but that's not going to rule it out forever. It's probably one of those, like, 3 months down the road, you're like, oh God, this is amazing. And the new, you know, whatever Mephisto deck loves Frankie Raye Nova. Oh my God, we got to play this with Mephisto. And that's what happens with this card. So definitely one to keep an eye on. This one has a lot of potential in a space that has already been proven buff scalers do really, really nicely. All right, moving on to the Fallen one. This card scares me a little bit, dude. This is a 5/5 with, on reveal, set your max energy equal to this card's power, which, of course, when played naturally with no outside influence, does nothing, right? Just sets your max energy to 5, which is what it already is. When you play this on turn 5, nothing changes. But as soon as this guy starts getting buffs, man, he's crazy scary. In particular, you know, I was thinking about like a natural curve of Shuri on turn 4 into Fallen One on turn 5. That's going to give Fallen One 10 power. That's going to count that power before his on reveal goes off. So that's going to set your max energy to 10, which I think actually then still rolls up to 11 on the following turn, as I understand it anyway. So basically, you know, for that 2-card combo, that's also what, like 13 power in play. Shuri's a 4-3 these days, right? So 13 power in play, you go up to 11 energy on the final turn, which seems like a crazy potential power spike. And it makes it so insanely hard for the opponent to like predict as well, because you're just working with so much potential power output and power spike basically all at once. That doesn't even consider other ways to potentially scale this even further. That's, you know, location help, that's other buff cards. Play a Nakia on 3 into a Shuri on 4, and then you got a Fallen One. He's going to 12, which is sending your max energy up to 13. It's just like the possibilities here seem absolutely crazy to me. Even if you don't hit Shuri, yeah, just catch a couple Gwenpool hits, right? Send this up to a 5-9 with Gwenpool. You're still talking about some insane results. So basically, you know, if you expect to put out, let's say at a high estimate, something like 12 to 14 power on turn 5, which by the way is bigger than the average 5 drop. That would be a pretty solid turn 5. Basically, you're sacrificing here maybe 7 energy, or 7 power, let's say, on turn 5, because this guy's much smaller. He's 5 power. Let's say you normally get 12. 7 power sacrificed. I will happily sacrifice 7 power for 5 extra energy or whatever. 6 extra energy on the final turn is certainly worth the sacrifice of 7 power. So any little buffs at all, you know, start to really rapidly make up the difference when you consider the power sacrifice by having this kind of downturn on turn 5. So even if you commit to it a little bit with Shuri, Gwenpool, Nakia, Okoye, whatever in a buff deck, right? That's nuts. Now, there is a little bit of a deck building challenge there, because you probably want a deck that's, you know, still going to have some early tempo so that you don't just go all in on this 1 or 2 card play. Probably going to want some stuff, some of those early buffers we talked about, right? Which does mean you won't always have the biggest hand full of stuff, because, you know, if you have 11, 12 energy on the final turn, you need to have stuff to play. So probably a little bit of a solve on the deck, but I think the energy output here is going to be so significantly crazy sometimes that it will absolutely be worth it. Like, you'll figure it out. You'll find a deck that makes sense. You'll piece together some really big turns, and the deck will probably have a reasonably good backup plan anyway. You know, it's like, okay, well, I've got Shuri in the mix. I want a Shuri Fallen One. I'm going to have enough energy for like Arnim Zola and Black Panther and stuff too. So, okay, well, let's just put, you know, Shuri Panther in the mix as well. And there's a different little win condition set up already. You know, like, it's not hard to necessarily piece together a deck that can kind of use both parts of that, the buff side of it and the extra energy side of it, and still have lots of big things to do. So ultimately what I'm getting at is this card scares me a lot. I think this one could be kind of broken, and it's one of those two that's sort of hard to balance in some ways, I guess. Like, they could make it a 5-4 or something, but that would be really weird and awkward for when you didn't have anything else to do. It would feel really punishing to play without buff. So I don't know, just like, this has got to be one they've paid attention to. They've got to be confident in this to print it in some ways. So it's like, you don't ever think it's going to be too broken, but at the same time, I just feel like people are going to make this absolutely nuts, and it's going to feel really big and broken. So I think the Fallen One's got so much potential to be really, really scary. Moving on here to Cosmic Ghost Rider. I still think this guy's so funny, dude. Like, why does he need the helmet to breathe? He doesn't even have a face. It's like a magical flaming skull. Surely he can breathe in space, and he doesn't need the mask to contain his ever-burning fire. What? How's there oxygen in there anyway? It's just a big thing of fire. Anyway, this card's a 5/7 with on reveal, remove the text from front row enemy cards here, which we have here kind of another tech card. We already saw that Stardust, but Stardust is like super specific, and this one on the other hand is really generic. Like, this works against basically anything your opponent is trying to do. There is still some really big upside on this card. You know, sometimes that's going to be stuff that's literally all about the front row. You know, say Captain Carter, for instance. Like, okay, I'm nervous about their Captain Carter. Let's just remove the text from Captain Carter. Boom. That location is totally screwed. Sometimes it'll be like little stuff that's, you know, doesn't feel that important, but, you know, they have like a Ravona down, you know, and it's like, okay, I'm just like, I'm going to take a Ravona and, I don't know, a Morbius or whatever, just like random little on reveals where it's like, it was just a little bit of a debuff to them. Like suddenly they have to spend a little bit of extra energy on the final turn. I played a 5/7. I'm not too mad. Hopefully that was like disruptive enough to this Mr. Negative deck or whatever, because now their unflipped Iron Man is more expensive, whatever it is, right? There's like a few little things here that can happen where you don't have to hit home runs necessarily to make this good, but there are just little incremental advantages where when you're playing a 5/7, maybe that's enough. We've had some of this 5/7 success space before with stuff like Legion. That could make some really big swings and some really big impacts. Certain decks are able to tolerate that. Kind of see Cosmic Ghost Rider in that space a little bit. And I like that, you know, it can work against ongoing decks. So, you know, like catch a Wong, catch a Cerebro randomly, whatever, right? There's a lot of targets still to hit. Can work against on reveal decks that have like Odin plans or something even, right? It's like, oh, they're going to Odin that later. No, you're not. I turned off the on reveal from those front row cards. Sorry, dude, you're not getting a follow-up on that Namora or whatever you were trying to do, right? Like, anytime you start to piece out little plans, end of turn cards, of course, now, God, end of turn cards are everywhere. We have this crazy end of turn meta. Turn off all those end of turn effects, right? Suddenly that Havoc that's chilling in the front row, nope, sorry, it's staying at 0. So this is just like universally good answer, right? So, you know, depending on the meta, you might actually prefer an Enchantress, or you might prefer a Shang-Chi, or you might prefer a Stardust very occasionally. But any meta can probably tolerate a Cosmic Ghost Rider as long as it fits okay from a curve standpoint. And, you know, like, yes, opponents can play around it to some extent, of course, putting all their good stuff in the back, save up that Cerebro Mystique for the back row to dodge the Cosmic Ghost Rider. But I think there will still be plenty of instances in games where this feels good enough. So can this make the cut in the kind of tech slop decks that we see today? Do those need 4 drops for Zabu to make them feel more efficient? I don't know. I think you could probably tolerate this. I think it could work. So I think, you know, shells like Erishim, for instance, make a ton of sense for Cosmic Ghost Rider. Ramp decks, kind of like 5 drops sometimes. This could be a good option there. So at the end of the day, I think this card's solid. I think this is one of the better looking kind of tech cards because of its general flexibility and the things that it can hit. So you're not so meta dependent. You're actually just kind of able to take this into any matchup and hope that it does something halfway decent sometimes. You know, on reveals generally have already done their thing. So that's the one maybe weak spot here, unless they got, like we said, Odins or follow-ups or something. But still plenty of options and hits. Decks run so many different things. You know, catch the random Angelas or whatever in the front row for a on reveal deck, or they're going to bounce their on reveal card. So just turn off the bounce on or the on reveal on Rocket Raccoon. So then when he comes back off the bounce, he doesn't scale again, right? Everything has hits. So that's why I think this card's actually pretty solid. So next up here is Redshift. And this card is, I think, actually really good. Like sleeper crazy good. I can't believe this is one of the Series 4 cards, in fact. This is a 2/3 with on reveal, discard the leftmost card in your hand to add a random card with the same cost to your hand. And the reason I think this is so insane is that Agatha is always the leftmost card in your hand, which means this is a guaranteed way to always discard your Agatha very, very early on turn 2. Like, he is just guaranteed to hit Agatha. Now, I forget to mention this sometimes when I cover Agatha decks. People always ask me, like, why do you want to play these Agatha decks? What's the advantage of Agatha over, like, just some other random 6-drop? Remember, Agatha is an extra card in your hand. She's always an extra card in hand. So that gets you deeper in your deck always, so you find more stuff to do, but also that makes her a really reliable target for things like Black Knight or Ghost Rider, where you know you have a big 6-drop that's ready to go that can benefit those synergy cards. Redshift just slots in so insanely perfectly into those Agatha shells that are already good. They just keep popping up over and over again as like, oh yeah, this is actually a good deck. We kind of forgot about it. We need to be playing this more. This is just such an insane fit. Like, that is going to make that deck even better, more consistent. You will probably only need like Redshift and Lady Sif now, so that like that's enough for your discard package or Agatha. I think that makes that a top tier meta deck, which already is sometimes. There's been multiple times it's been like the best deck on Untapped for a week here and there or whatever. This could make it even more consistently good. So as far as I'm concerned, absolute home run fit for Agatha. Maybe not a bad discard card either. Like Blade in that slot on the 1-drop, being able to discard the rightmost thing. Sometimes it's good to have some flexibility there. So this could be something that also goes in discard decks, could be something that goes in Hella decks. Don't forget, this is also adding a card to hand. So even in the Agatha deck, like you get another nice 6-drop, you get a Magneto to play on 6 or whatever. It could be a great follow-up. In discard decks, we've seen some of those with the Collector package, because Collector can get crazy big when you're adding all those swarms back to hand. Redshift is another way to kind of do that. You probably don't get as many hits as swarms, of course, but maybe just 1 or 2 extra points here or there on some of those other cards. Another thing in hand for MODOK to hit means +2 on Morbius, right? There's just all these little feedbacks that happen. Occasionally it's going to turn into Apocalypse as well, which is kind of cool. But anyway, you get the idea here for Redshift is that, like, I think this is actually really quite good. Insane in Agatha, maybe still good in discard. That makes this card very high potential as far as I'm concerned. All right, so next up here is Terrax the Tamer, or as I like to call him, DC's Dark Side. He really does look like Darkseid. This is a 3/3 with on reveal for each location, shuffle a rock into the losing player's deck. So if you're winning locations, you send rocks over to the opponent, potentially 3 rocks even on turn 3. Imagine like a Quicksilver, Domino, Terrax, and boom, they get 3 rocks on turn 3. That is basically a Subterranea. That could be incredibly disruptive if they draw multiple rocks. Of course, also, the big conversation here is going to be Darkhawk. This is a perfect Darkhawk synergy card a la Korg and Rock Slide. And this is one I want to talk about in the context a lot of priority, because winning locations is often a conversation of priority. Because, you know, if you play a Quicksilver into a Domino, there's a very good chance you're going to have priority going into turn 3. And I'm not recommending that, by the way, because Domino's pretty bad card. But you get the idea. Korg into whatever 2-drop. Into Terrax could be amazing, because if you get priority, you're just going to be winning because the opponent hasn't revealed their power yet. That's going to be a very reliable way, just getting out quick, to hit at least 2 and usually even sometimes 3 locations to make Terrax good. Now, keep in mind, if you're losing a location, you're also going to get a rock. So you got to be a little careful. You don't want to get your own rock and mess up your own deck, miss your Darkhawk draw or whatever. But if it's tied, keep in mind, you won't get a rock. You're not the losing player. It's just tied. So it might be smart to do like Domino and Quicksilver in one spot and then Terrax somewhere else. And maybe if you have priority, so you're at least getting 2 and maybe leaving a spot unrevealed and tied. That might be fine if you're doing this on turn 3. The alternative, of course, is turn 6, where you play Darkhawk on turn 5, then Mystique into Terrax on turn 6, and hopefully shuffle at least a couple rocks into the opponent's deck on turn 6 to boost up that Darkhawk and that Mystique. Again, you know, if you need Terrax's power to make Darkhawk and Mystique strong enough to win, then it might feel like it's kind of pointless, because you're saying, well, hey, you know, he's not going to shuffle if they're not winning. He's only going to shuffle if I'm already winning. So why does he need to shuffle? I'm already winning to get the shuffle. But again, that comes down to priority, right? If you have priority going into turn 6, the opponent hasn't revealed the stuff that would theoretically beat your Darkhawk and Mystique. So it's again about priority management. So you want to make sure you have priority going into that turn 6, so that Terrax is seeing the unrevealed enemy cards. They haven't contributed that power yet. He's far more likely to be winning. Then he can add like 4 or 6 power to your Darkhawk and Mystique that gets them over the hump before the opponent has revealed and had a chance to knock that down. So definitely a card that is somewhat, you know, susceptible to losing priority, I guess, to some extent. Like, he really often, I think, will be encouraged or demand that even to feel good. But I don't think that's going to be hard. I think this actually slots into Darkhawk pretty well. Darkhawk's not as crazy of a metaforce as it has been in the past, but there are still good Darkhawk lists. I see them pop up all the time. And I do think Terrax gives them a nice little boost. So yeah, I think this is a really solid card for Darkhawk decks. It's going to be very niche. I don't really see it outside of that much. Maybe a priority deck cares enough about disruption off rocks to run this independently, but it's like 99% Darkhawk. Let's say 97% Darkhawk, which might be all it needs. All right, so next up here is Firelord. This is a 4/6 with on reveal, revive one of your discarded or destroyed 3-cost cards here. So a way to resummon something that you've lost. I think to talk about this card, we just have to go ahead and talk about the next card as well. This is Air-Walker. He is a 3/3, which actually got nerfed. When we saw this in the data mine initially, it was a 3/4. I cannot believe it's a 3/3. This blows my mind. But it reads, when this is destroyed, replace it with a 4-cost card from your hand or deck, which this creates a little bit of chain of sorts, right? Where basically you play Air-Walker on 3, you destroy it on turn 4 with whatever, Carnage, Venom, who cares? It brings out a Firelord, right? So now that's a 4/6 that you've kind of cheated into play for free. And then Firelord will immediately also revive your Air-Walker. So, you know, it's a nice little chain that gets you basically a lot of power back for free. Can also admittedly pull it from deck, which can be nice because it can kind of like thin your deck or whatever as well. Do keep in mind, if you want to continue that chain with like another 4-drop, you could destroy Air-Walker again to get another 4-drop, but the more 4-drops you run, the less likely you are to get the Firelord off of the Air-Walker. So, you know, in other words, if I have a second 4-drop in there, say a Wiccan, I don't know, it's a bad example, you get the idea. If you have a Wiccan in there, you might get the Wiccan the first time instead of the Firelord and therefore break your chain. So it's like, how much do you want to commit to this chain effectively to make these kind of good together? I'm like still not sold on this, but I'm stunned that this got nerfed, because it's like, was this actually too good? Like, did this do enough to make it worth it? My thought is like, you probably always want to run these 2 cards together in a destroy deck, and destroy decks just have like such refined packages. Like, do they have space and time to like do all of this? You know, like there are usually cheaper things to destroy. Then you destroy them on turn 3 with, you know, the Deathlocks of the world. You know, you weave in an X-23 and a Carnage. It's just kind of hard sometimes to make space to weave in a 3-drop that just is kind of 9 power. If you look, you know, if the Firelord really resurrects the Air-Walker, that's basically 9 power for 3. Venom can kind of loop back in on that. Carnage, all those little extra hits can kind of feed back in, but it's good, but it doesn't feel like crazy to me. You know, it's not on that Deadpool level. I mean, honestly, even like Bucky Barnes actually contributes a lot of power for only 2 energy. We don't even see that be good enough in destroy decks usually. So there's something about this that just doesn't seem like it's worth the commitment to me from a 2-card standpoint. It also maybe excludes other 4-drops to some extent. I almost feel like I see more reasons to run Air-Walker, really, and maybe this is why he got nerfed, is like independently, Air-Walker actually looks a little more interesting to me because it's just a good way to cheat out a 4-drop really reliably. Like if you have some really key 4-drop you need to hit, maybe Wiccan, maybe it's like Wong or whatever. I just have to make sure I find a Wong, right? Well, Air-Walker can be a way to do that. As long as you're running a destroy package, have an Air-Walker, destroy it at any stage, you're guaranteeing you're going to pull your Wong, whether it's in hand or deck or not. You have it. If you have a Wong in hand, you can just play it too, but this can be a way to cheat something out. So could almost see this as like a combo enabler or something of sorts that's just like used as a tutor, which is a way to find specific things out of your deck. Using these together, I don't see it as much. And Firelord too, like it's fine, I guess. You know, it's a 4/6. That's a fine baseline. Maybe this makes sense in a destroyer discard deck where it's just like, hey, it's just like a pile of bodies. But I don't really seeing it being that synergistic in either case. It just feels like stats for stats sake in some case to me. So I don't know. You know, I'm thinking about stuff like Dakin kind of makes sense. Like play a Dakin, destroy it, it comes back, you get another shard. Like again, that's just more work than other ways to do the same thing. So I'm just not in love with Firelord here. I don't see it really in regards to this combo. It looks kind of clunky to me, you know, but I guess Air-Walker does have a little more fringe potential, but again, doesn't necessarily feel like a good fit in a destroy deck either. It's like, okay, I pull out an Atuma, I guess. I don't know. There's just not a lot of 4s typically seen in a destroy package. And this guy, importantly, does not work with discard, unlike Firelord, which can kind of do both duties, but I just don't see a good fit in either. So to me, this one looks clunky. And this one looks, let's say, like situational, I think, at best. I don't think it looks nuts necessarily. And I don't really like them together, even though it's pretty clearly designed to work together. And yeah, and I guess this is the final 2 cards. So let's go ahead and rate all these cards from 1 to 4 stars, starting with the best. The Fallen One is a 4-star card. Silver Surfer First Steps is a 4-star card. Galactus First Steps is a 4-star card. Redshift is a 4-star card. Cosmic Ghost Rider is a 3-star card. Frankie Raye Nova is a 3-star card. Terrax the Tamer is a 3-star card. Stardust is a 2-star card. Air-Walker is a 2-star card. Firelord is a 1-star card. Yeah, folks, that is the Galactus First Steps season. Handful of exciting 4-star cards there. I like that this season, I think these cards are a little bit more independent of each other, unlike this last month where it felt like we were just waiting on the family to come together and all the end of turn cards. I mean, we're still getting some more, but man, it just felt like every card was kind of waiting for the next. And I thought this last month was kind of a boring Marvel Snap month, just from a flavor standpoint. Like, I love Fantastic Four, but they're already in the game and they all kind of did similar stuff. This season looks more fun to me because they're characters I don't know, some big crazy cosmic looking effects, new Galactus. Actually much more excited about this season than the last, even though we still got some movie tie-in stuff. I think still some cool things to play with. So ultimately, I think a pretty strong month once again. A lot of cards once again. It's becoming tough, I know, to keep up with just how many freaking cards are Marvel Snap. So I'm thinking about you guys out there. Hopefully you'll have fun watching me play these either way. But thanks for joining me. Share your thoughts on these cards down below. And until next time, game on.